The room was silent. It was still dark outside. The sky was not awake yet. Inside the control center, hundreds of people were sitting in front of glowing screens. No one was talking, no one was smiling. Every eye was fixed on one single object, a giant space shuttle. It stood on the launch pad like a sleeping monster, tall, heavy, powerful. It was filled with fuel, fire, and hope. In just a few hours, it would try to leave Earth, but something was wrong. A red light blinked on one of the screens. An engineer noticed it first. He leaned closer to his monitor. His heart started beating faster. He checked the numbers again. They did not change. He swallowed hard. This was not a small problem. He slowly raised his head and looked around. Other engineers were busy. Some were drinking coffee. Some were typing. Some were checking systems. No one knew what he was seeing. Not yet. He pressed a button. "Flight director," he said in a low voice, "we may have a serious issue." The room changed instantly. The flight director stood up. He walked quickly toward the screen. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He had seen many problems before, some small, some deadly. "What is it?" he asked. The engineer pointed at the screen. A line of data was flashing red. Fuel pressure. It was not stable. If the pressure dropped too low, the engines could fail. If it went too high, the shuttle could explode. Either way, the result would be the same: disaster. The flight director took a deep breath. "How much time do we have?" he asked. The engineer looked at the clock on the wall. "T-4 hours, he said. 4 hours, that sounded like a lot of time, but in spaceflight, 4 hours could disappear in seconds. The flight director turned to the room. "Attention everyone," he said loudly. "We have a fuel pressure problem. I need answers, now." The room exploded into motion. People started talking fast. Fingers flew over keyboards, phones rang, screens changed. Data streamed like rivers. Far away from the control center, inside a quiet building, the astronauts were preparing. They were wearing special white suits. These suits were not normal clothes. They were life support systems. If something went wrong in space, the suit could save them, or at least try. The astronauts did not know about the problem yet. They were trained to stay calm. They trusted the people in the control center. That trust was everything. Back in the control room, the fuel team was checking valves and pipes. The shuttle used liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. These fuels were extremely cold, colder than anything on Earth. One small crack, one tiny leak, one wrong number, and the shuttle would turn into a fireball. An engineer spoke up. "The pressure drop is coming from the external tank," he said. The flight director's jaw tightened. "That's the worst place," he replied. "If the external tank failed, there would be no second chance." The flight director picked up a red phone. This phone was special. It connected him directly to the highest decision makers. He pressed the button. "This is flight," he said. "We have a possible fuel pressure failure. We may need to stop the launch." On the other end of the line, silence. Stopping a launch was not easy. It cost millions of dollars. Years of work, thousands of people, but human lives were worth more. Outside, the sun slowly began to rise. Its light touched the space shuttle. The white body of the shuttle glowed softly. It looked peaceful, but inside it was full of danger. The fuel inside the tank was restless. Pumps were pushing it through pipes. Sensors were watching every movement. Computers were calculating every second. One sensor was screaming. Inside the astronaut building, the crew was called into a room. A manager entered. His face was serious. "There is a technical issue," he said. "We are investigating." The astronauts looked at each other. They did not panic. They had trained for this. Delays were normal. Explosions were not. One astronaut thought about his family. Another thought about the mission. Another closed his eyes and breathed slowly. Back in the control room, engineers argued. "We can fix it," one said. "No, it's too risky," another replied. "We need more data." Said a third. Time was running. The countdown clock kept moving. T-3 hours. The flight director listened to every team. He asked questions. He demanded clear answers. His voice was steady, but his mind was racing. If he made the wrong decision, people could die. Finally, one engineer spoke carefully. "There is a chance," he said, "that the sensor is wrong. The pressure may actually be normal." A chance. That word was dangerous. The flight director leaned back. "A sensor failure," he repeated, "or a real fuel problem." One meant delay, the other meant death. He picked up the red phone again. "We need to decide," he said. "Continue or abort." Outside, the world was waking up. News cameras were ready. People around the planet were waiting to watch history. They did not know how close they were to tragedy. Inside the control room, the flight director closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he opened them. "Keep investigating," he said. "No launch decision yet." The desperate call had been made. The clock kept ticking, and the space shuttle waited. The countdown clock did not care. It kept moving forward without emotion. T-3 hours. Inside the control room, the air felt heavy. No one joked now. No one drank coffee. Every second felt sharp, like glass. The space shuttle was still standing outside. Tall, quiet, waiting. The problem was still there. Fuel pressure. It had not gone back to normal. An engineer wiped sweat from his forehead. He checked the data again, then again. The numbers moved slightly, but not enough. "This is not random," he said softly. "Something is leaking." That word hit the room hard. Leaking. Liquid hydrogen was not just fuel. It was invisible. It had no smell, and it could escape through spaces smaller than a hair. If hydrogen leaked and met oxygen, fire would follow. Silent fire. Deadly fire. The flight director stepped closer. "Where?" he asked. The engineer pointed at a diagram of the shuttle on the screen. Near the bottom of the external tank, he said. Close to the engine feed line, that was the heart of the system. If that area failed during launch, the engines would lose fuel in seconds. The shuttle would fall back to Earth like a burning stone, no escape. Outside, the wind moved gently. The shuttle looked peaceful, but inside its metal skin, fuel was flowing like blood. The flight director turned to another team. Thermal cameras, he asked. A woman shook her head. No clear sign, she said. If it's leaking, it's too small to see, big enough to kill. In another building, the astronauts were now fully dressed in their suits. The white fabric looked clean and strong, but inside their hearts were beating fast. They still had not been told the full truth. One astronaut sat quietly. He had flown before. He knew this feeling, the waiting, the unknown. He looked at his gloves. Space does not forgive mistakes, he thought. Back in the control room, a young engineer spoke carefully. What if we increase the pressure slightly, he suggested. If the leak is small, it may stabilize. The room went quiet. The flight director turned slowly. And if it's not a leak, he asked. The engineer hesitated. Then pressure could rise too fast. Explosion, fire, death. The flight director nodded once. Not yet, he said. The clock moved. T-minus 2 hours, 30 minutes. The sun was now fully up. News helicopters circled in the distance. The world was watching. Millions of people believed this was a normal launch day. They were wrong. The flight director picked up the red phone again. This is Flight, he said. We have a possible hydrogen leak, still unconfirmed. The voice on the other end was calm but firm. Is it safe to continue? The voice asked. The flight director looked at the data. He looked at the engineers. He looked at the clock. I don't know yet, he said honestly. Silence. Then the voice replied, you have 1 hour. 1 hour to decide, 1 hour between history and disaster. Engineers rushed to run tests. Valves were opened and closed. Sensors were reset. Computers compared old data with new. One technician noticed something strange. Flight, he said. Pressure drops only when temperature changes. That was new temperature. Liquid hydrogen was extremely cold. When sunlight hit the tank, metal expanded slightly. That tiny movement could open a gap small enough to hide, big enough to leak. So it's real, someone whispered, a real leak. The room felt colder. The flight director clenched his hands. Can we fix it? He asked. The answer came slowly. No, an engineer said, not on the pad to fix it. The shuttle would need to be drained, taken apart, checked fully. That would take weeks, millions of dollars. The flight director closed his eyes for a moment, then he opened them. Inform the crew, he said. In the astronaut building, the commander received the message. There is a hydrogen leak, the manager said. Launch is in danger. The astronauts nodded. They had expected this. Still, disappointment filled the room. Months of training, years of preparation. All waiting behind a single leak. One astronaut looked at the others. We fly when it's safe, he said simply. Back in the control room, the final data arrived. The leak was confirmed, small, silent, deadly. The flight director stood up straight. All teams, he said clearly, prepare for possible launch scrub. Those words were heavy. Launch scrub meant stopping everything, draining fuel, ending the day. The countdown clock still moved, T-minus 1 hour. The flight director took the red phone one last time. This is Flight, he said. We recommend no launch. The voice on the other end did not argue. Understood, it said. Safety first. Outside, the shuttle remained still. No fire, no roar, no launch. The world would be told it was a delay, but inside the control room, everyone knew the truth. The shuttle had been moments away from becoming a disaster. The silent leak had been stopped, for now. But the journey to space was not over. It was only delayed. The launch pad was empty of sound. No fire, no smoke, no roar, only wind. The space shuttle still stood there, tall and silent, like it was confused. It had been ready to fly. It had waited, and then nothing happened. Night slowly returned. Most people thought the danger was over. They were wrong. Inside the control center, the lights were still on. Many engineers had not gone home. Their faces were tired. Their eyes were red, but no one wanted to leave because questions remained. The leak had been found. The launch had been stopped, but why had it happened? That question was dangerous. A senior engineer stared at the screen. He replayed the data again and again. This should not happen, he said quietly. This system was tested hundreds of times. The flight director stood behind him. He did not speak. He knew something deeper was hiding. Small problems did not appear without reason. Somewhere inside the shuttle, something had failed silently, and silence was the most dangerous enemy in space. Outside, the fuel tanks were being drained. Liquid hydrogen slowly left the shuttle. White clouds rose into the air like ghost breath. Every drop removed reduced danger, but also removed trust. In another building, the astronauts had returned to their rooms. Their suits were off. Their helmets were placed on tables. The mission was paused, not canceled. Paused. One astronaut sat on his bed. He did not turn on the light. He looked at the dark window. I was ready, he thought. He had imagined the launch, the shaking, the fire, the moment Earth lets go. Now he imagined something else. What if they had launched? What if the leak had grown? What if the engines had failed? He exhaled slowly. Someone saved us today, he thought. Back in the control room, a young engineer spoke again. I checked older missions, she said. There were small pressure changes before, but no one noticed. The room went quiet. Before, the flight director asked. She nodded. Not big enough to stop a launch, she said. But now I'm not sure. That sentence landed hard. If the problem existed before, then the shuttle design itself might be flawed. That meant danger was not new. It had always been there, hidden. The flight director rubbed his forehead. How many missions? He asked. The engineer hesitated. Several, she said. No one spoke. The shuttle was not just a machine. It carried people, dreams, flags, history. If its design had a weakness, every launch was a gamble. Outside, the launch pad lights turned off one by one. Darkness wrapped around the shuttle. It looked lonely now, almost fragile. A maintenance team walked slowly around it. They wore helmets and flashlights. Their steps echoed softly. One of them stopped. Look at this, he said, a tiny mark near a fuel line, almost invisible. Metal had rubbed metal over time. Movement during fueling, expansion from heat, contraction from cold, slow damage, quiet damage. Back inside, the message reached the flight director. He closed his eyes. So it wasn't just today, he said. It's been growing. Yes, the problem was patient. It waited, just like space does. In the astronaut building, the commander called the crew together. We were lucky, he said simply, but luck is not a plan. They nodded. They trusted the system, but trust had limits. Outside the gates, reporters packed their cameras. They wanted answers. They wanted reasons, but the truth was complex and uncomfortable. The flight director finally spoke to the room. We don't just fix the leak, he said. We fix the thinking. Everyone looked at him. No shortcuts, he continued. No assumptions. We start from zero. It would take time, weeks, months, but lives demanded it. The shuttle would not fly until every voice was heard, every doubt faced. That night, the control center slowly emptied. Chairs were pushed back. Screens went dark. Only one screen stayed on, the shuttle camera. It showed the spacecraft standing alone under the stars, silent, waiting. It had almost flown with a hidden wound. Next time, there would be no silence. Next time, the shuttle would demand answers. Because space never gives second chances. Morning returned, but peace did not. The launch pad looked calm again. The shuttle stood quiet like nothing had happened. To the outside world, it was just another delay. Inside the program, it was a warning, a deep one. Meetings began early, long tables, serious faces, no jokes, no smiles. Engineers, managers, and leaders sat together. Each person carried a different fear. Some feared failure, some feared delay, some feared headlines. But one fear was stronger than all others: loss of life. A large screen showed the shuttle design. Lines, pipes, valves, and tanks filled the image. It looked perfect, too perfect. The system depends on trust, a senior engineer said. Trust in numbers, trust in sensors. He paused, but numbers can lie. The room stayed silent. He changed the slide. A graph appeared, small pressure changes, almost invisible. These were ignored, he continued, because nothing bad happened. Nothing bad happened. That sentence felt dangerous because space does not warn twice. Another voice joined. We pushed the limits, a manager said. Schedules were tight, expectations were high. The truth slowly came out. Launch dates were promises. Promises became pressure. Pressure became silence. No one wanted to be the person who said stop. In spaceflight, stopping feels like failure, but sometimes stopping is survival, far away. The astronauts watched the news. They did not speak much. They listened carefully. One astronaut noticed the words reporters used. Minor issue, small delay, nothing serious. He shook his head slowly. They don't understand, he thought. A small problem in space is never small. In another room, a young engineer sat alone. She stared at her notes. She had noticed strange data months ago. She had not spoken loudly enough, not because she was wrong, but because she was unsure. What if I am wrong? She had thought back then. Now she knew silence had weight, and silence almost killed. She stood up and walked into the next meeting. I want to say something, she said. The room turned toward her. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook. We trusted experience more than data, she said. That was the mistake. Some people looked away, she continued. Space does not care about experience, only reality. No one argued. Because she was right, outside the shuttle was being opened, panels removed, pipes exposed. Engineers moved slowly, carefully. Every sound echoed, every scratch mattered. They searched not just for damage, but for truth. Metal does not hide feelings. It shows them: cracks, marks, weak points, all signs of stress. Inside the control center, one screen showed a simple word: risk. It was underlined, bold. The flight director stood in front of it. We fly again, he said. Only when risk is understood, not ignored. He looked tired but steady. Later that night, the astronauts walked outside. They stood far from the pad. The shuttle was lit softly. It looked beautiful. One astronaut spoke quietly. It almost took us, he said. Another replied, or it saved us. They stood in silence. Above them, stars filled the sky, calm, cold, watching. Space was patient. It always waits. The shuttle would fly again someday, but now it had forced humans to listen, to data, to doubt, to fear, and fear, when respected, becomes wisdom. The pressure was no longer in the fuel lines, it was in the minds, and that was exactly where it needed to be. The night before the next decision was long. No one slept well. Inside offices, lights stayed on, papers covered desks. Coffee cups stood cold and forgotten. Every person knew that the next choice would define everything, not just a launch, a culture. The shuttle sat outside, half open now. Its skin was no longer smooth and proud. Panels were removed, wires were visible, pipes looked fragile. It no longer looked like a hero, it looked honest. Engineers moved around it slowly like doctors around a patient. They touched metal gently, they listened, they measured. Metal spoke in small signs, a slight bend, a tiny scratch, a place where heat and cold had fought too many times. One engineer stopped and sighed. "This part was never meant to move like this," he said. Design papers were pulled out, old decisions returned like ghosts. "Good enough," someone had once said. Good enough had almost killed. Inside a conference room, leaders gathered again. This time the tone was different. No pressure, no promises, no dates on the wall, only one question. "Do we truly understand this machine?" The flight director sat quietly. He let others speak first. An engineer stood up. "We believed we controlled the shuttle," he said. "But the truth is we only borrowed control. Space always decides in the end," another voice followed. "We trained for failure," a manager said, "but we forgot to respect doubt." Doubt had been treated like weakness. Now it felt like protection. In a quiet hallway, an astronaut walked alone. He stopped near a window. The shuttle was visible in the distance. He imagined sitting inside again, the tight seat, the smell of metal, the sound of the hatch closing. He did not feel fear, he felt responsibility. "If we go," he thought, "it must be because it is right, not because we are ready." In another room, a young engineer stared at a single bolt, just one. It held two parts together. She had run tests on it all night. Heat, cold, pressure, again and again. Finally, she leaned back. "It fails slowly," she said to herself, "but it fails." She reported it. No one dismissed her. That was new. Outside, the sky began to change color. Morning was coming again, another day without sleep, but something had changed. People were listening, not to authority, not to schedules, not to fear of delay. They listened to reality. The flight director stood before the team. "We will not launch soon," he said. "We will redesign, we will rebuild trust." No one argued. Months of work lay ahead, hard work, quiet work, the kind no one sees on television. Outside the gates, the world moved on. News cycles changed. Attention faded. But inside the program, something powerful was growing. Respect. Respect for small numbers, respect for quiet voices, respect for the fact that space is never impressed. The shuttle would fly again one day, but this time not as a gamble, as a promise kept. That day many people finally slept, not because the danger was gone, but because they chose not to ignore it anymore. And that choice changed everything. Months passed. No cameras, no crowds, no countdown, only work. The shuttle was no longer treated like a hero. It was treated like a question that needed honest answers. Every part was checked again. Some parts were replaced. Some were redesigned. Some ideas were removed completely. Engineers argued, but not loudly. They debated with data, not pride. Every decision moved slowly. Slow was no longer weakness. Slow was safety. In one workshop, an engineer held a new piece of metal in her hands. It was small, simple, but stronger than before. "This will not fail quietly," she said. "If it breaks, it will tell us." That was the goal now. No silence, no hiding, no guessing. The shuttle was learning to speak. Inside meeting rooms, something else changed too. Young voices spoke more. Questions were welcomed. No became an acceptable answer. Schedules were written in pencil, not ink. Because space does not follow calendars. In the astronaut building, training restarted, slowly, carefully. The astronauts returned to simulators. They practiced emergency after emergency. Fire, loss of power, engine failure. They trained not because they expected disaster, but because they respected it. One astronaut noticed something different. People listened to them more now. When they asked questions, engineers answered fully. When they raised doubts, no one brushed them away. Trust was being rebuilt, not blind trust, earned trust. Outside, the shuttle began to look whole again. Panels returned, lines were sealed, sensors were upgraded. It stood taller, not prouder, stronger. One evening, the flight director walked alone near the launch pad. The sun was setting. The sky was orange and purple. He stopped and looked up at the shuttle. "It almost taught us the hard way," he thought, but it didn't have to because someone listened, somewhere that mattered. Weeks later, a simple meeting was held. No drama, no excitement, just a statement. "We are ready to test again, not to launch, to test." Fuel flowed slowly into the tank. Sensors watched closely. Engineers held their breath. Numbers stayed steady. No drops, no spikes, no red lights. The shuttle was calm, as if it knew. Tests ended. Data was reviewed, then reviewed again. Nothing was rushed. At last, the decision came. Launch day would return, quietly. No promises to the world yet, just preparation. In the astronaut building, the crew received the message. "Launch window approved," the commander said. No cheers, only nods. They had learned too. Outside, the shuttle waited again. But this time, it was not waiting in silence. It was waiting with understanding. The journey was not about speed anymore. It was about respect. And soon, the countdown would return. But first, everyone listened one more time. The countdown returned. Not loudly, not proudly, quietly. T-minus 10 minutes. Inside the control center, the room was full again. Same screens, same chairs, same people, but not the same mindset. No one spoke unless needed. Every word mattered now. The shuttle stood ready outside, fully sealed, fueled, alive. Fuel moved through new lines. Sensors watched every breath the machine took. Computers waited, ready to take control. The flight director sat still. He did not look at the big screens. He watched the small ones. The small numbers were the dangerous ones. One decimal place could change everything. Guidance, he asked. Green came the reply. Propulsion, green. Fuel pressure, a pause, then stable. The room exhaled together. Inside the shuttle, the astronauts were already strapped in. Tight seats, limited movement. The cabin felt smaller than before, but calmer. One astronaut listened to the sound of air moving through the suit. Another focused on breathing slowly. No one joked. This was not fear, this was respect. T-7 minutes. The launch tower arms began to pull away, slowly, carefully, metal separated from metal. There was no turning back now. The commander looked at the panel. All systems look good, he said. His voice was steady, but his heart was loud. Outside, steam flowed around the shuttle like fog. The cold fuel met warm air. The machine looked unreal, almost alive. In the control room, a young engineer stared at her screen. This was the same system she had warned about months ago. The numbers were perfect now. She swallowed. This is how it should have always been, she thought. T-5 minutes. The computer took full control. Humans could no longer stop the launch. This moment was always the hardest. Trusting the machine, trusting the work, trusting each other. Flight director folded his hands. No alarms, someone whispered. The silence was heavy. T-3 minutes. Inside the shuttle, the crew switched to internal power. The hum changed slightly. They felt it. Everything felt sharper now. One astronaut closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them. He was ready. T-2 minutes. The final checks began. Engines prepared for ignition. Valves opened. Fuel rushed faster. Pressure climbed. Everyone watched. It held. T-1 minute. The room was still. No phones rang. No chairs moved. Even breathing felt loud. 30 seconds, the announcer said. The astronauts tightened their grip. The shuttle trembled lightly, not fear. Energy 10, 9. The flight director stared at the screen. 8. This was the moment they had protected. 7 months of listening. 6 of stopping. 5 of fixing. 4 of choosing safety. 3 of respecting doubt. 2. The engines ignited. Light exploded beneath the shuttle. Sound crushed the air. 1. The shuttle rose slowly, then faster. It left the ground, not as a gamble, as a promise kept. The sound ended suddenly. One moment there was fire and force. The next, silence, not quiet like Earth, a deeper silence. The engines were off. The shaking was gone. The shuttle was no longer fighting gravity. It was falling around Earth. Inside the cabin, the astronauts felt something strange. Their bodies became light. Tools floated. Hands moved slowly through the air. They had reached space. For a few seconds, no one spoke. This was the moment every launch leads to, the moment after survival. Outside the window, Earth appeared blue, white, beautiful, fragile. It looked peaceful. No borders, no noise, no pressure, just one planet. The commander finally spoke. "We are in orbit," he said. In the control center, the room exploded, not with sound, but with breath. People leaned back. Some smiled, some wiped their eyes. No one shouted. This was not victory, this was relief. Months of doubt had led to this calm moment. The flight director removed his headset. He looked at the screen one last time. The shuttle was moving fast but smoothly. He nodded. "Good flight," he said quietly. Inside the shuttle, the astronauts began their first checks. Everything worked. Every system responded. Every sensor told the truth. The machine was no longer hiding anything. Trust had been earned. One astronaut pushed gently off the wall and floated toward the window. He placed his helmet near the glass. Earth filled his view, all the fear, all the arguments, all the waiting, worth it. He thought about the leak. The delay, the nights without sleep. One small voice had spoken up, and it changed everything. Back on Earth, the world saw the launch replay. Flames, power, beauty, but they did not see the real story. They did not see the meetings. The doubt, the courage to stop. They did not see how close disaster had been, and that was okay because the goal was never to be seen. The goal was to return alive. The shuttle circled Earth silently, one orbit, then another. Each pass was proof. Proof that listening saves lives. Proof that stopping can be stronger than going. Proof that space does not forgive, but it does allow. In the control room, a young engineer sat quietly. She watched the data scroll by, all green. She smiled just a little. This is how it should feel, she thought. Calm, above the planet, the shuttle moved on, a machine of metal carrying human courage, not perfect, but honest, and honesty was the most powerful fuel of all. The journey to space had worked, not because humans were brave, but because they were willing to listen. The end.